Okay, hello there everybody. I'm making this video because people have requested this sort of thing, so that's what I'm going to do. Very quickly, this is my mixing bowl, got for 99 pence from a local 99 pence shop. These I got from a specialist cooking shop. They are plastic spoons which have accurate measurements. That's the quarter teaspoon, that's the half teaspoon, and then it goes up to 1 teaspoon, then we got half a tablespoon and a tablespoon, so I can get proper accurate measurements for volume when I'm doing baking type experiments. This is the cup measure I've got, so that will be an accurate, recipe quantity cup. I've also got a half cup, quarter cup and eighth cup measure as well, which came with the kit, so I can get that accurate. Simple non-stick baking tin, okay, no problem. And up here, that's the buckwheat flour that I'm going to be using. And in my other cupboard, I've got the sorghum flour that I'm also going to be using as well. Today I'm going to try another combination. Now with the last bread, let me just get the loaf up here. We have some air bubbles making it look like a real bread, but it's still very dense and rubbery. Okay. Now this was made with soya milk, which adds an extra binder to it anyway, and just 4 cups of buckwheat flour plus 1.5 teaspoons of baking powder and 1.5 tablespoons of a thickening agent, which was arrowroot. I'm now going to try it without arrowroot, without soya milk, taking 1 cup's worth of sorghum flour and 3 cups worth of buckwheat, and see if I can create a simple recipe. So just water plus sorghum plus buckwheat plus baking powder, and I have no idea what's going to happen. I'm using 2 teaspoonfuls of the gluten-free baking powder this time to see basically what happens. Now I am tempted to put some xanthan gum into it. The xanthan gum is another thickener which is often used in bread making, but I don't know whether that will be a good idea, because the buckwheat itself, as you've seen, has already created this proper bread-like effect. So I'm planning on just relying upon the buckwheat itself to provide the binder. Okay, if magic is the art and science of changing conformity with the will, this is my will to try and make some bread, and I'm trying to do it as scientifically as I can based upon experiences, and trying my hardest not to do the same thing twice, expecting to get different results. So here we go, I'll see what I can do. Okay, all of that is just the flour, which is 1 cup sorghum, 3 cups of buckwheat. I'm going to add the baking powder, because Tesco's baking powder is bulked up with, I don't know whether you can see it there, but with rice flour, so it should be gluten-free, fingers crossed. And then it's just going to be water. I think in this particular experiment I'll do without the xanthan gum, because I'm just relying upon the buckwheat to do all the binding in its own right. And we'll just have to see basically what happens. So at the moment it's actually quite, a combination of terrifying and exciting. We'll just get all this sort of like mixed up. I tend to stir the dry ingredients up about 200 or 300 times to make sure it's all nice and even prior to adding the water or other liquid, and see what happens, and fingers crossed. Okay, I've added the water to it. As you can see, it is like a glutinous sticky stuff, which is pretty weird in a gluten-free flour, but that's what buckwheat does. It's amazing. Okay, that's the oven placed on maximum. It's almost preheated already. That's the very glutinous batter in its baking tray already. So here we go. I use a timer on my steamer to time out 40 minutes. And it'll go ping when it's all ready. Leave the door half open so I can still hear it. Here it goes. Bread's going to go into the oven. This is it's in a batter format. It's had a few minutes just to start developing some bubbles. That's going to help when it hits the heat. And we'll just see what happens. Fingers crossed it'll work this time. Whilst the bread's cooking, I'll show you what else I've been doing with food. These are adzuki beans in this jar here. These are mung beans in this jar. And this is after I've been soaking them overnight. I only put enough adzuki beans to go up to about there on the jar. Soaked it with water overnight, and they filled up to this level. I've drained them through putting a sieve over the top, turning the whole jar over, and allowing all the water to empty into the sink. So I got rid of all the water that way. So it's now drained, but as you can see, they've swollen up to, what is it, about 3 times or 4 times the volume. With the sprouting as well, we should have much more. Adzuki beans take longer to sprout than mung beans, that's why they're separate this time. We've had a similar quantity of, maybe 3 times the expansion with mung beans, with the addition of water and soaking them. And eventually we'll end up with that. And I'll just eat them raw, because it'll be fun. And they taste quite good, and also if you cook them in this state, the flavor's a lot better as well. And they cook an awful lot quicker. Okay, 40 minutes later, we got the completed loaf. This is done 40 minutes at top temperature. Firstly, you'll see the crust is cracked. On the previous loaf, which was just the buckwheat and soya milk, the crust did not crack, and it domed in a very traditional bread-like way. So lowering the quantity of buckwheat and removing the soya milk has actually created the cracked crust, which I've seen on some of my other just sorghum, gram flour and other loaves. This is probably what you get when you're just using water as the liquid. Okay, so I should have added something else to bind it. So in that respect, I'm already seeing that this is probably not very good. From the erupted bit, so to speak, in the middle, we got some good bread-like air bubble-y type bits. That's a reasonably good sign, but will that go right the way through the whole thing? And in fact, will it be too wet and dense in the middle? That's the question. Now, we won't know until we started cutting right through into the middle of the bread. Remember, this is straight fresh out of the oven. It's still piping hot at about 200 degrees probably. So I might give it a minute just to calm the heck down prior to having a look inside. So what I've decided is the soya milk was somehow important as a binder. I should have added something else. Maybe I should have added the arrowroot in it to give it a bit more strength and stability somehow. And you know, this one is so far only looking 50-50. It's not looking like a good bread. But we'll have to see what happens when I cut it open. Right, this is a bad experiment. Alright, because for this purposes of this video, I cut the loaf down the middle, straight down the middle. Because in the middle, it's always denser when I'm doing my own breads. In this particular case, we don't have what I was hoping to get, namely more air bubbles. Remember, we've got more raising agents. We got 2 teaspoons of baking powder rather than 1.5 this time. And we've just got solid doughy bits. I don't know whether you can see that. That is solid dough in some places. So in that respect, it's gone bad. So the soya milk was important to add an extra binder. I've probably used too much sorghum flour. Okay, there are some hopeful bits around the outside, which means that if I was to slice some off at the edge, it would probably be okay. I think that the flavor will probably be good. Maybe this combination of sorghum plus buckwheat would be okay. If I was to have added the soya milk and kept the arrowroot actually in it, because you know, that's not quite what I would call the face of a happy bread. That is dense. That's another close crumb, scone-like stuff. I mean, this bit is supposed to be called the crumb. That's called the crust in proper baking terminology. And so this is what's happened. This is probably another one that I'm not going to like. We'll try and lop some off on the outside, on the edge, and see basically what's happening inside there. Just a minute. Obviously, that's bad news. I want to try and get a dome, because I think that's a positive sign, and it shows that there is some glutinous type activity within the actual dough itself. Okay. Slicing the edge, the end off the bread, has shown me this. This is much more, I mean, it's spongy, okay, it's spongy, it is probably edible, but it's probably the sort of thing you've again got to have in very, very, very thin slices if you're going to eat it, because it's incredibly dense. So this is difficult, you know, this is not quite right. So, if I was to try this again, taking into account that this time round I used 2 teaspoonfuls of baking powder, but I want to keep that the same. I think I'll go back to 1.5. 3 cups of buckwheat. Well, I think I want to stick with the 3 cups of buckwheat. 1 cup of sorghum. Yes. Adding water to it, thus removing a thickening agent, is probably a bad thing to do. So I'm going to go back to using soya milk, or a combination of soya milk plus water, in order to try and bring back some of the doughiness, proper doughiness that was there before. And yes, I do think the adding of the arrowroot or potentially xanthan gum could possibly also be a good thing. So this particular combination didn't quite create what I wanted. So this is another loaf which probably ain't going to work out right, but as is traditional, I must at least have a bite. Actually, despite the fact I've said so many bad things about its structure, the flavor is okay. So, visually speaking, it's not quite bready enough. The very middle of it, I don't know if I'd want to eat that. Some of that, it just looks like dough. It looks too doughy. I haven't taken a bite from that. I've taken a bite from the end of it. So, and the end of it is okay. Not too bad. Maybe I should have done this like an Irish soda bread round, maybe with an indentation in the middle, so more heat could get in. So what have I learned from this? Apart from the obvious, namely playing about with bread making is good fun. Soya milk is important. Soya milk is quite important in generating the proper bread-like appearance of the bread. Binders are important. And despite the fact that the buckwheat actually provides some kind of binding in its own right, it doesn't quite provide enough for me to be able to create a fully developed bread purely using the buckwheat and the water. Okay? It could be that there's something in the buckwheat that reacts with the soya milk and with the arrowroots to create a good total effect. That's a possibility. But the very fact I'm munching on this without feeling too sick means that, what the hell, you can eat it. So maybe trying to get a perfect loaf of bread is actually a pipe dream. And just getting something that's bready that you can eat is probably the best thing that you can do. And that'll do nicely. Flavor-wise, it's actually pretty good. And also, as it does actually, because it's still rubbery and doughy, it would slice quite well for sandwiches anyway. So, I got my criticisms of it, but what the heck, I can eat it. Time for a nice cup of tea to go with this. Speak to you in a while.